Welcome to another edition of the Brazilian Shirt Name podcast. He is the legendino Tim Vickery in Rio.
And he is Dotun Adebayo, king of the nighttime airwaves in Salford, Manchester.
Where they have just reimposed the lockdown restrictions. Yeah, 12 hours ago, they lifted the lockdown restrictions in Trafford, which is literally over the Manchester Ship Canal from where I'm speaking to you at the moment. They lifted them 12 hours ago, and then they reimposed them in the last hour or so. So
they don't know what they're doing. They don't know what they're doing. As Ina Sharples said in Coronation Street in 1960, folk round here, they don't know out. There's people who've just been for one walk down Canal Path. They think they've charted the Ganges. Genuine Coronation Street dialogue, 1960.
Well, as Elsie Tanner might have said, some folks round here shouldn't be round here because we're not Gottus night, you know. Ungenuine Coronation Street dialogue from whatever area you want to take it. Interesting.
Well, that could well be from 1996. It's timeless, isn't it, that dialogue?
No, I think she had died before that, Elsie Tanner. I think she had died in real Pat, whatever her name was.
Pat Phoenix?
Yeah, Pat Phoenix, that sounds right. I think she died. Well, Ina Sharples and Pat Phoenix, Ina Sharples and Elsie Tanner, the two most memorable characters from Coronation Street ever, in my view. And once they were no longer there, it wasn't worth watching. Ina Sharples had been wearing that well, we call it a do-rag nowadays, but in those days it was just called a rag around her head for years and years and years. And she was sardonic, to say the very least. And Elsie Tanner was the eye candy, wasn't she?
Isn't it striking how the great tradition of the English soap opera, the British soap opera, is kind of backward looking? To the Coronation Street started just as the Coronation Streets around the country were being knocked down. And it's very, very defiantly old style community working class. Whereas soap operas in some other countries, on the American soap opera tradition, very, very much of the soap opera tradition here in Brazil, is much more a kind of aspirational fantasy world.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And the funny thing is the grittiness of the soap operas in the UK from the early 60s with Coronation Street and all the other pretenders to the throne, several of them by the BBC, of course. EastEnders being the latest of that thing. The grittiness comes from the 1950s. There was this movement in theatre, which was like kitchen sink dramas, if you like. Most notably, Look Back in Anger, not the Oasis track, but the play by John Osborne, which introduced a new kind of gritty reality to drama. So the drama of the past of George Bernard Shaw and the great George Bernard Shaw, I'm not knocking him, but nevertheless, that was of its time, and others died a death because these new young writers came in. And so we're not portraying the fantasy anymore. We're not portraying Eliza Doolittle learning how to speak grammatically correct. What we're doing is showing the real life of working class people. So you had plays like A Taste of Honey, or films like A Taste of Honey, and all these things.
Yeah. It was a play first, wasn't it? Rita. It was. Yeah,
Rita. I can't remember her last name.
Something like that. Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right. That's who starred in it. I was thinking of the name of the dramatist. She was from
Sheila Delaney.
That's right. Wow, I'm impressed, mate. I thought you didn't have much education at your school.
Well, I'm obsessed by English post-war history. I find it absolutely fascinating. And with that theatre thing, there was one in Stratford that was very, very influential.
Theatre Royal Stratford East.
Yes.
And the play was Oh What a Lovely War. Was the one that really made them. But you're thinking of the name of the theatre director, aren't you?
Is it Joan something? Joan.
You're right. Joan.
Starts with L. Were you involved in any of that? Because you had Little something.
Yeah, I think it was Littlewood.
You have some kind of, you were picked up young, weren't you, as a budding actor? Were you involved in that kind of theatrical wave?
Unfortunately, I wasn't. The closest I got to it was when I was at the National Youth Theatre, because that the impact of the new gritty realism of theatre that, as I say, started with John Osborne's Look Back in Anger about 1955, dealt with the Suez Crisis, amongst other things, just as, you know, rock and roll was bubbling up and all this sort of stuff, but also followed on then by the likes of Harold Pinter, probably the most successful of that gritty realism sort of thing. Harold Pinter and, well, Samuel Beckett went in slightly different direction, but I think arguably he's part of that same generation. Unfortunately, I wasn't. I'm probably about 20 or 30 years too young to have been able to be part of that generation, but the influence was still being felt in the mid 70s and late 70s when I entered the National Youth Theatre. So the great dramatist of the National Youth Theatre at the time was Peter Turson, who wrote Zigga Zagga. Zigga Zagga being one of the original football plays. Zigga Zagga, Zigga Zagga, oi, oi, oi. And I was never in a production of that, but, you know, it was being revived all the time around me. So Peter Turson on the one hand, and also Barry Keith, who was my real sort of mentor, wrote a role around me based on the fact that he knew this black guy who was in love with James Dean. And I'd said to him once, you know, when he said, "You do know James Dean was white?" I said, "Only on the outside." And he used that in his play Killing Time. If you look at the play Killing Time, which was huge and massive, I can't tell you how massive this play was in 1977. It caught the mood of the time, the punk attitude of the time. If you look at the original edition, or you look at the manuscripts of that, and it will tell you the first production was at the Soho Theatre Poly. It's only got 3 characters in it, one of them being Rob Glenister, who became a TV star in the Hustle. People will know him from that. Rob Glenister, and his brother is also a big TV star, of course, as well, Life on Mars, etc., Philip Glenister. And there was another guy who was a great actor, but never really quite made it. Something Kelly, I can't remember his name. And then Dotun Adebayo. There's only 3 of us in that. And that was a gritty, you know, a sort of homage, if you like, to that gritty realism of the 1950s. Anyway, you do know, Tim, that people are tuning into this podcast to hear about football. You know that? Yeah,
and we can make a football link here, because you mentioned Samuel Beckett and his play Waiting for Godot, which enraged and then enchanted audiences. And one of the great reviews of it, I think it was Kenneth Tynan, the theatre critic, he said, it's a play, and he was writing in praise of it, he said, it's a play where nothing happens twice. And I've used that so many times about football matches, because, you know, nothing happened in the first half, and then nothing happened in the second half. So it was a match where nothing happened twice. But that's not the case of the match that we can talk about, and the time that we can talk about over the next few minutes. Of course, that type of drama that Samuel Beckett is famous for is called the theatre of the absurd. And when nothing happens in a football match twice, it is pretty absurd, isn't it? Indeed. These 22 guys on the pitch, 11 on each side, trying to batter each other and put one past each other, and nothing happens, not once, but it's a game of 2 halves, so it's twice. That has got to be as absurd as it comes, I would have thought, in terms of football viewing. Okay, the match that we're talking about, and incidentally, if you're tuning into the Brazilian Shirt Name podcast for the first time, you know we focus on a match that we consider to be quite an important match, legendary match for whatever reason, and we also try and give you a little bit of the context of the times through the prism of music. So we'll be looking at the charts in a moment or two of the time. But the match is, June the 15th, 1996. I remember this as a glorious summer, Tim. And on that very day, it was a hot, hot, hot day. Well, I was around. I was back. I've been in Brazil for a couple of years, and I thought it was all over. I thought I had a job lined up coming back in May 1996. In the event, I didn't, and the whole thing fell through. So I had a little bit of work, but not very much. And I had to kind of then plan a way to come back to Brazil. I just met her indoors, so that was a powerful incentive to come back to Brazil. But for visa reasons, I would only have 1 more year. Really, I really couldn't. So it was a kind of make or break. Going back at the end of the summer in 1996 was the kind of make or break moment. Is Brazil going to work for me or not? So I was around for the summer of 96. And firstly for May, which was as cold as January. And May was absolutely freezing. And then I was around for Euro 1996. And I've got lots of happy memories of it. It's a time when, looking back, I think there's an element of artificiality about that time. And London, it seemed to me coming back that there was just a blaze of cocaine, a blizzard of cocaine all over the place, you know, which I didn't remember from before. And also a lot of the kind of good feeling which was beginning to come in, you know, pre-Tony Blair and so on. It was all based on credit. It was all false and artificial. But there was a sense of good times, or good times coming. And so it was a nice time. It was a nice time to be around.
I think you're right about the artificiality. I have no memory, and I'm not saying this in a sort of a drug-induced way. I have no memory whatsoever of the cocaine, and I've never taken cocaine. So the people around me probably were still lighting up spliffs in the good old ganja rasta kind of way, rather than, and nobody's ever come up to me and say, yeah, Dotun, you know, do you fancy doing a line of cocaine? I'm not of that generation. Probably people think, I wouldn't try it on him. He's, you know, hardcore rasta man, ital, etc. But I do remember the artificiality that you're talking about. I've seen it twice. In that summer of 1996, where we were all singing joyously, "Football's coming home, it's coming home, it's coming home." We couldn't get enough of that song, and we built up the anticipation for a lot of the other teams coming for the Euro Championships of that year. Remember, it happens every 4 years, it goes from country to country. They didn't see it as if football was coming home. They saw it as, we want to win the championship. We were too busy engaged in singing, oh yeah, we started this game, we invented this game, and now finally it's coming home to where it belongs.
Although fair play to it, word got around the players, because it was a showcase for the stadiums. And what I was doing at that time, I did for a few months, I did something called Club Call. I had to write 3 stories a day about West Ham and about Brentford. Now, it was the close season. No, the Euro 96 was happening, but, you know, nothing happens at Brentford, or nothing happened then during the season. So 3 stories a day during the close season. What on earth am I going to? Yeah, what on earth am I going to do?
You're a journalist. 3 stories a day. I've got 10 to do today. I haven't got a clue what I'm going to do, and I'm serious. I'm not joking. I have got 10 to do today. For the Voice newspaper, I still do. The boss called me up yesterday and said, right, Don, I want you to cover 10 pages, and can you get it all to me by tomorrow? At least the ideas by tomorrow. So I've got to do it today. There's no word of life.
No, you do it. You find a way to do it. And what I was doing with Brentford was I was inventing transfer speculation and then killing it. You know, so that got me a story for 2 days.
Oh, that's forever. You can do that forever. I mean, is Messi coming to England? Is he coming to Man City?
Is he coming to Brentford? Yeah, that's where it gets harder. Well, but with West Ham, it was easy because West Ham were buying everyone. They didn't work. You know, Futre came from Portugal. Radu Chow came Radu Chow came and did some wonderful shopping in London, you know, from the Romanian team. So, you know, they were buying everyone, and word was getting around the players. There's serious corn on offer in their English hills, you know. When I came back to Brazil, you know, talking to players then, it'd always been Spain or Italy. Suddenly it became Spain, Italy, or England, and not necessarily in that order. So it was an important championship for word getting around the global community of players of hello, England is back.
Well, I'll tell you what, you mentioned West Ham there. What I remember about West Ham, I think at this time, was Harry Redknapp the coach for West Ham.
I think he was, yes.
Yeah, because his claim to fame at this time was that he would get on a budget airline, you hear me? A budget airline. So he'd get on Ryanair or he'd get on EasyJet, and he'd go over to Eastern Europe to get a budget player. Yeah, and West Ham fans are not too happy about this period. They say that, well, a lot of money was spent And they're just echoing, I didn't know you were going to come up with that, but it really just immediately triggered conversations I've had with West Ham fans. And they still remember that period as a period where a lot of money was spent in the transfer market, of which there are lots of, for them, question marks over, and players that came to have a good shopping day out on Oxford Street in the centre of town, basically. This is what they said, and they blame Harry Redknapp. They haven't forgiven him for that period. And I suppose the theory was that, look, we're West Ham, we're not Man United, so I'll fly on a budget airline for 30 quid to Romania and find somebody in Romania that I can pick up for 10 grand, you know, or whatever the equivalent was in those days. And the theory is right, but for a top flight team, that can never really work, I'd have thought. Can it?
And, well, Harry's son is a key figure in our game today, the England-Scotland game, because the first half was waiting for Goddard. Nothing happened. Half time, I think it was half time, off goes Stuart Pearce, on comes Jamie Redknapp. England have an extra player in midfield. Jamie Redknapp, so good on the ball. The moves start flowing. England start playing well. But this is Jamie Redknapp. So what does he do? He jumps up, lands badly on his ankle, sprains his ankle, and doesn't play any further part in the tournament. That's Jamie Redknapp's career in a microcosm.
I think he would agree with that as well. Whether it was Liverpool or Tottenham or wherever he was playing, he usually jumped up in the air and sprained his ankle and was ruled out for the rest of the season. I feel for him in that respect. Some people have. Yeah. I think it was Gaza was it Gaza? Somebody else that said that. No, they were talking about what's his name, midfield wizard for Arsenal, Jack
Wilshere.
Yeah, Wilshere. Yeah, I think. Either Arsene Wenger said it about him or he said it about himself, that some people just have that Achilles heel. He's got a glass ankle. That's his problem. He's got a glass ankle. So anything happens to that ankle, he's off for the rest of the season. So his genius, we never saw the best of Jack Wilshere.
We should remember this I remember being back in 2010 and seeing him. I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. He was fantastic. Yeah. We should remember this when we accuse players of being greedy. Because first of all, they know how hard they've had to work to get there. And secondly, they know that they are one injury away from it all ending. No wonder they're insecure. Yeah,
one kick away from it all ending, or in Jamie Redknapp's position, one jump away from it all ending. Okay, so we're talking about England versus Scotland at Wembley, June the 15th, 1996. Why this is a really interesting game? First of all, you talked about the sense you got from returning to England at that point. Of course, for us here in England, there was a buzz right across the country, right across from John O'Groats to Land's End. There was a buzz about this game because it harks back to the old, what we used to call the home nations tournament. So for those who don't know, England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland used to take part in a sort of a four-way mini tournament. Was it every year or every 2 years?
No, it was every year.
Every year,
the end of the season. At the end, usually at the end of the season. It was horrible. I always hated it.
It was the best thing. How can you say it was horrible? That was the best thing ever on football. Tim, how can you say that? Take those words back, Mr. Vickery.
I never liked
want to bring
it.
back the home nations.
I was never into the home nations. This is very English arrogant of me, but I just couldn't care, And I used to meet the Scottish fans because, 1 year the game would be in England and 1 year the game would be in Scotland. And I used to meet them coming down in the West End and drinking afterwards. And they'd always say, why doesn't it matter to you? Because we're not Scottish. I don't define myself against you in a way that you define yourself against me. It's very, very arrogant, I know. And I remember being around when the time, it was a time when they all had those ginger wigs. You remember those ginger wigs? They're all wandering around in those ginger
around Piccadilly
wigs.
Circus. Yeah.
And they took charge of Trafalgar Square as they always do. And this is true story. The morning of the game, I went to make a phone call in a phone booth in Trafalgar Square, and there was like a bottle in the phone booth, and the bottle.
Don't tell me you drank the contents. Don't drink the
Well, no,
contents.
or eat
Thank
them.
you.
It was full of excrement.
Of course.
Yeah, no, I don't have any definitive proof that this was someone from north of the border who done this. It would be, it would be leaping.
Don't go there.
No.
Even
But
though
it gave me an extra reason.
They do poo as well north of the border. So if you're
Mm-hmm.
suggesting that no, it can't be them because, like the Queen, they don't poo. No, you got that wrong. Got that wrong. Okay, it's London. It could have been anybody. It could be any of 9 million Londoners. Because we know what Londoners are like when they get caught short. Did I ever tell you about the time? This wasn't that long ago either. It's like in the last 3 months, I was driving through Camden Town in North London, centre of London, really, Camden Town as it is now. And there was this black woman. Look, Camden Town is full at the moment of crackheads, yeah? You see them. Really? I drive home. Yeah, it's a little bit sad. It's a little bit, even though the area is a really expensive area. For some reason, I don't know if there are some like homelessness shelters or whatever, but like grown, and I'm not knocking an addiction. I don't want people to think that I don't have any, I understand it's an addiction. It's an illness, arguably. But there are people wandering about looking to score at 5:30 in the morning when I'm there, and the police are just driving past. What can they do? But anyway, and this wasn't 5:30 in the morning. This was like on a Sunday early evening, probably about 6:30 in the evening, driving past Camden Town, a place I know really well. There's a phone box on the right-hand side. It's a one-way system on that part of the road. Phone box, I know, driven past it 100 days. This time, there's a black woman in there. And, obviously she's worse for the wear, skinny and looking as if she's like buzzing or whatever. And she's literally crouched down and, oh man, it was horrible. It was not, you wouldn't wish that on any other human being.
No.
And I'm not going to go into the details of what I saw, but let me just say it's left an indelible mark in my mind, if not a kind of unsavory one. I can't eat at the same time as I think about that one. Let me just put it that way. Anyway, so let's go back to June the 15th, 1996, when you found this bottle of excrement that you're not going to attribute to any of the Scottish fans.
No.
Although in the way you said it, I think, because you talked about the ginger curly hair, and then you talked about them taking over Trafalgar Square, and then you talked about...
But it was in Trafalgar Square.
Yeah, you see, I'm following the line of the trajectory of that conversation. Lots of ginger-haired people taking over Trafalgar Square, bottle of excrement, and let's face it, there are a lot of blue and white flags, yeah? A lot of blue and white flags. So let's draw our own conclusions.
Yeah, there's no causality necessary. No.
I know. No cause and effect, but there is, good judge would say, there is grounds for good probability. Yeah. We're going to get in trouble for this.
We are. And I have great affection for Scotland. It's the greatest wee nation that ever drew breath.
The great thing about this 1996 Euro Championships is they did qualify. They did qualify.
They did qualify, yes.
You like to remind us.
Not that it did them much good.
Well, hang on a second. It did a lot of good, because remember, I'm still thinking about the old Home Nations tournament, yeah? And the reason why it matters to Scots, there was a one time they were
and Rod Stewart.
Of course, because every now and then they were able to pull one over on the mighty England, as it were. And if they did it at Wembley, there wouldn't be a blade of grass left on that Wembley pitch afterwards.
Yeah, and the Wembley pitch will be full of Scottish people and Rod Stewart.
And no grass. Rod Stewart singing, I am sailing, or we are sailing, whatever he would sing at that point. Okay, and what was in the charts at the time? Any Scottish influence? Was Rod Stewart in the charts?
Looking at the charts, see, what I remember from being back then, there's two things that I remember. One is a song which wasn't in the charts at this time. Maybe it didn't chart. I don't know. By Rosie Gaines, who used to play with Prince, called "Closer Than Close." Everywhere yeah, it's a lovely track. Everywhere I went around the time of Euro 96, that was blaring out. So, you know, if I close my eyes and transport myself back to then, I'm hearing Rosie Gaines, Closer Than Close. And the other thing that you just couldn't get away from then was Oasis, they were just absolutely everywhere. I don't know this because I kept on getting mistaken for Noel Gallagher.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you sure you got mistaken for Noel Gallagher?
No, true. You know, people, or people saying you look just like him. You know.
Really?
Yeah.
Did you have a Parker on? Did you have a Parker on?
No. I was a better dressed version, I think.
And his face is much rounder than yours, is what I would say, having seen him up close and personal.
Yeah, no, that's probably true. But it was just wall to wall Oasis as well, wasn't it? It was really their moment. Did you like them?
I loved them from the start. I didn't think they needed to get into some kind of quibble with Blur, but it worked well for both sides. It was a classic sort of Jamaican, back chat kind of thing, a feud between two bands that got both sides selling much more records than they'd ever sold before. So for me, I like that part of it, to be honest. I thought they were wonderful. And how I got Oasis, it's a funny story. I had an author, black woman who lived in Southeast London, lived in Feltham, actually. Not Feltham, where Stephen Lawrence was murdered. No, where Stephen Lawrence was murdered, Eltham. So she lived on an estate out there. She had two beautiful daughters, but she would bring them up on her own. And the youngest daughter was about 5 years old. The older daughter was about 7 or 8 years old. And I used to take them out for a little McDonald's, a treat, when I used to come and work with their mother on books. Anyway, these are two young black girls in Eltham. The older daughter, 7 or 8, started singing, I can't remember which of the Oasis tunes, whether it was Wonderwall or something like that. And I suddenly realized Oasis aren't just a sort of an indie rock band, which is what I kind of thought at the beginning. Oh, right, I've seen this all before, indie rock band. And the indie music basically excludes black people. Sure. It just excludes, because we don't get it. Partly we don't get it, and it's not tailored for us. But, the idea that some guys are dressing up in ripped clothing, it's like black people didn't get punk. It was kind of like, I mean, I got it, but I'm saying that generally, like, you're supposed to dress up when you're a pop star. You're supposed to look good and show us all that kind of stuff. And the indie stuff, you will get black people who go to college getting into the Smiths and stuff like that. That's as indie as you might get, but it won't be across the board. It will be just like the odd kind of.
It's why reggae was a black punk.
Yeah, it was.
Because the Rasta thing attracted that kind of person.
100%. But it's interesting how loads of white folks got into reggae from day one. They kind of got it. They got the rebellious nature of it, but it's not necessarily the other way around. We take a little bit of understanding of, and it is interesting because you're saying that essentially that maybe because of colonialism or because of not enslavement, but the relationship that Britain has had with the colonies, that we understand English culture in many ways. Black people from Africa or from the Caribbean understand English culture in ways that English people probably don't see it because we're looking at it from the outside in. Yeah. But also, the converse is true, that or the contrary is true as well, that English people are readily able to absorb a lot of culture from the Caribbean and Africa and India, by the way, and the subcontinent, because they've had, curry is not surprising to me that it's the national dish. It's not surprising to me. Listen, we've been eating, or British people, English people in particular, have been eating curry for 200 years. So why would it be fish and chips from Belgium? Why would that be the national dish? It's got to be curry.
Yeah, but again, there's an immigrant thing there, because fish and chips is a Jewish thing. It was first, it was Jewish immigrants bringing the fish, and it's Jewish businessmen having the idea of putting the fish together with the chips. So, we're just enriched. We're an island that's been enriched by wave after wave after wave of immigrants, all of them bringing stuff that makes us the best part of what we are. And I get angry with all this people hating Britain, but because they're rejecting an elite view of Britain that doesn't have anything to do with me. I don't care about the national anthem or imperial conquests. That's not my Britain. You know, my Britain is fish and chips, curry, football, music, and the best of British music for me is always our take on Black American or Jamaican music, and you mix it all together, and that's my. But it's got nothing to do with the official. Yeah, exactly. I'm part of the two-tone generation. Yeah. And I hate the way that they're pumping at the moment that that hating Britain is to be that their vision of Britain is an elite view of military and imperial conquests and the national anthem and the flag, because it doesn't mean anything to me. Never did.
I don't think it means something to a lot of people, although today, as we speak, just in the last few hours, the new Director General of the BBC, Tim Davie, has done what even the BBC are describing as a U-turn on the issue of whether the proms this year should be filmed with the jingoistic singing of the national anthem and Rule Britannia, even perhaps more controversially, at the end of the proms. And he's basically, the BBC mooted that they were just going to play the tunes but not sing the lyrics, which are somewhat controversial, especially from slave traders, as Britain was, or British people were at the time, slave traders then saying, but Britons never, 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 never shall be slaves in Rule Britannia. And now he's done something of a U-turn there. It's controversial because newspapers went ballistic, as you can imagine what the Daily Mail and the Daily Express, who have it in for the BBC in any way, how they were describing this as a sort of a capitulation. And I think the Prime Minister might even have said that as well. And the BBC, of course, have got to, the new Director General has got to engage in very serious conversations with the cultural departments of the government to ensure that the BBC's future is secure and the licence fee is still there, etc. So he's like playing a game at the moment. I'm saying like a political game as much as going ahead with trying to decide upon this controversially and so on. But why is it though, given what you've just said about Britain being a nation of all these influences, you know, and you have to accept that those influences are there because of colonialism, whatever you think of that itself. But why do you think it is that we're ready to absorb all these others, but for some reason, the old enemy, as in Scotland, or for them, the old enemy as in England, can never see eye to eye? It's kind of like, no, we're not going to absorb. And I know this is, I'm not going to mention deep fried Mars bars, because each time I mention that, people just go ballistic and saying, oh, what a stereotype of Scotland. I was actually thinking of deep fried Mars bars in England. So hold your fire, everybody north of the border. But do you know what I mean? There is some things, like we won't even accept Scottish pound notes. You know, we'd sooner accept a Nigerian naira, which devalues, you know, it's now about 1,000 naira to a pound, whereas it was 2 to 1 when I first went back to Nigeria in 1978. It's now about 500 or so, or 600 to a pound, something absolutely nuts. And I'm just saying, well, why would we, what is it, why are they the old enemy? Why is Scotland, and I know they want to leave, you know, the Union, fair enough, but I'm saying, why do they have to be the enemy? And when it comes to football, why do we have to stick the boot in a little bit more when we're playing Scotland?
Well, no, I think that's the other way around. I think we would think of the enemy as being Germany or Argentina or something, but Scotland would think of the enemy as being England, and Scotland has always defined itself against England. And one of the reasons right from the start, do you remember the lawman, the late lamented lawman, Peter Law?
Yeah, Peter Law. Yeah.
He gave me a book about the history of Scottish football. And I found it fascinating because you could clearly see that right from the start, one of the motors of Scottish football was the fact that football was something where they could meet England on a level playing field. They could take on the English and beat the English, because they defined themselves against us. And the notion of Scotland being a victim of colonialism, I think, is problematic. I think Scotland was a partner in the imperial project, but it was the minor partner. And as time has gone on, it's become increasingly minor. Was it Glasgow's a city built for a million, which now has 600,000 or something like that? You know, and the Scottish heavy industry suffered maybe earlier than the English heavy industry did. So there's feelings of abandonment and resentments. But as I used to have these chats with Scottish football fans in London in the late 80s and so on, you know, they were saying, why don't you go to the game? Why don't you care? And I would tell them, I'd rather go to a game against Germany. You know, you're not my enemy. And this is the thing that hurts them, perhaps. You're not really that relevant to me, you know, whereas for the Scots, the English are totally relevant. For the English, being the bigger partner, we can afford to ignore them, and obviously that just infuriates them all the more.
Should we go back to this football match? Do you want to tell people about this football match, or should we talk about why Three Lions is number 2 in the charts and not number 1?
Yeah, was it on the way up or on the way down? And the reason that it's not number 1 is that there's a cover version from the Fugees, which is at number 1. Their version of "Killing Me Softly," and the Fugees is also, you know, from a political issue, because, you know, they're refugees. That's the name, and this is the time when that whole asylum seeker thing is starting to become part of the English political discourse, isn't it?
100%. I mean, it's funny that you should talk about the Fugees in that way. One time, as they say, because Roberta Flack's "Killing Me Softly" was already a perfect song. So old timers like myself would be like, don't go there, Fugees. I don't know who the fuck you lot are. Just don't go there. Leave Roberta Flack alone. She's a musical genius. She made a perfect song. Don't go there. But like it is with music sometimes, Tim, it's an earworm. And I don't know if it's the one time bit that gets your ears going and thinking, oh, bloody, I wish Roberta Flack would have just done that. Killing me softly with his song. One time, killing me softly. I can hear it. It's almost like, how on earth did they find, it's like Flavor Flav with Public Enemy. You know, it's kind of like, you know, Flavor Flav, just shut the fuck up. Let Chuck D do his thing. But then you do it without Flavor Flav.
It's not the same. It's not
and
the same.
Suddenly that is the hook that Wycliffe Jean found in this song. And also, let's face it, Lauryn Hill, at this point, I'm sorry guys, but she was gorgeous at this point. You know, there is a clip of her when she does, because what's the big award show in the United States that they used to film at the Apollo Theatre, the Apollo in Harlem? You know, they've got this big awards thing. And when she went on it, when she was, it's Showtime at the Apollo, I think. You know, there's the original sort of awards show way before X Factor and all of these things. This was the original awards show, talent show, where you'd, sorry, not award show, talent show is what I meant, where people could come up, rock up on stage and get booed off properly. If they open up their mouth and that first note is wrong, they cannot come back from that. You know. Anyway, Lauryn Hill's on there. Like
an audience is demanding us a Glasgow Apollo.
Exactly. It's Showtime after all. Anyway, Lauryn Hill is on that. When she's about 13 years old, and she's an amazing singer. But you know what's happened on the night that she's on? Whoever she's competing against, one of the other contestants, one of the other amateurs trying their luck on the talent show, have brought their entire extended family in and told them just boo everybody else. Oh. You know, so it was cruel. But hey, she learned in the School of Hard Knocks. You know what I mean? So she's on this doing her flipping. I can't remember what song she's doing, but she's absolutely amazing. And she's just looking a bit stunned as everybody's like, boo, get her off. And it's not real. You can see it on YouTube. I promise you can still see that on YouTube. Anyway, you're quite right to make the link between the refugees and immigrant communities, and what they did for Haiti was absolutely amazing. But it's number 1 in the UK. You know, it's nothing for us. It's nothing to do with, okay, we learned that they've abbreviated their name from refugees to Fugees, and it works, gives them a unique name. But we're not thinking about that. all we're thinking about is England's coming home, it's come on, football's coming on, Scotland's coming home to the home of English football, and that's number 2 in the charts. Still a backdrop, though, for us playing this game against Scotland. I think you'll hear people in the stands singing England's coming home, especially when Gaza does his trick, which I've got to be honest, I've only seen Dennis Bergkamp do a trick like this before on the pitch. It's an amazing moment of football, which I think when you talk about this match, there is one magic moment, just as there was England versus Argentina with Maradona's hand of God. You know, the magic moment not being the hand of God, but the goal that came after that. You know, this goal by Gaza. Do you want to describe this?
Well, he gets an excellent through ball from Darren Anderton, and he's got the big Colin Hendry coming at him, the centre half.
Big guy.
Yeah, big guy. Just straight out of that Mel Gibson film, you know.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
So with the first touch, he just lobs it over him, runs around the other side, and before it's bounced, just crashes the volley in, and then runs away to celebrate. And the celebration is one of those moments when the goal is fantastic, and the celebration's almost as good, because they got done for this binge drinking in a dentist chair. Which was part of their pre-tournament preparation on a trip to Hong Kong or something like that. So that's what the celebration was. He goes and lies on the floor, and they all kind of mime that they're pouring alcohol down his throat. It is a Gaza moment. And when I grew up watching him at Tottenham, and I love him, and the pleasure that he gave to so many. You always hope that he's going to be all right. But there's a link you can make between him and the coach of that team, Terry Venables, which is that they both had great careers. But you look at both of them and you think they could have been better.
A lot better, 100%. What went wrong, though? Because it's easy to say it was the addiction for Gaza, in the same way that George Best, arguably, it was the addiction. But George Best still left a full legacy, I would say.
Yeah, but he never played a World Cup, and Gaza played a World Cup and was magnificent in a World Cup. You know, when England reached the semi-finals, he played this Euro '96 when he had. It's one of the best games I've ever seen England play. Was the next game when they beat Holland 4-1, and Holland were great. You know, and Holland in that tournament, I don't think they conceded a goal before the England game or after the England game. Well, they might have conceded one. They hardly conceded. And England, it's one of the great performances from the England team when everything clicked. And Gaza was amazing that night. He was as well as a natural talent. He was a much more intelligent player than people give him credit for. But he was a loose cannon, wasn't he? And he sometimes the geniuses they're like. There was a big album at that time, George Michael. It's a great album, I think. Older, which I think is his masterpiece. And he is older, and he's reflected, and he's still great. But George Michael, he used to say, a star is not made by extra bits. A star is made by the bits that are missing. And I think that's you can see that in Gaza. The little, the little things in your brain that keep you on the straight and narrow, the common, he hasn't got that. And that means that he can see different things on the field. He's got his sense of geometry is amazing. He can see different things. He's got this extra creative, imaginative touch, but he also doesn't have those stabilizers in real life. And so he's always living close to the edge.
This is a question that always recurs to me when you see a footballer make an incredible, show some incredible skill. And remember, the skill, it's not just in a vacuum by itself. It is a skill that is predicated by spontaneity, because you don't know what the other person is going to do. So this isn't something you can train for fully on the pitch. You've got to react very quickly, and yet you can't do it unless you've got the training that enables you to be able to do it.
What's the phrase here? I think I got this from Picasso. You've got to learn the rules like a professional in order to break them like an artist.
You learned that from Picasso. He didn't tell me
Yeah.
that.
No,
He
no.
didn't tell me. Well, he gave you some private tuition, did he?
Yeah. No, he said it. Someone wrote it down, and I read it.
Okay, just checking. I thought when you said you got it from Picasso, I thought you got it from the horse's mouth.
I only steal from the best, baby.
No, but you know, if you had got it from Picasso, you'd have done what everybody else was done. So, Picasso, just draw a little matchstick man on this little serviette that I've got here. You never know. This time next year, we could be millionaires. So, how then do you judge a footballer? Because you used to hear, what was it, Bobby Robson said about Gazza, that he's as thick as two planks.
Daft as a brush.
Daft as a brush, was it? Well, same difference. But you know, but you can't, if you've played football in particular, and you know how quickly you have to think about these things, then it gives a lie to the daft as a brush.
Yeah.
I just wonder, there is a different kind of intelligence that comes with football, and whether when we go around saying pass your A levels, pass your GCSE, or this year have a free pass on us and go to university, go to Oxford, and we'll say that you would have got an A star anyway. Do you know what I mean? If we judge, society judges intelligence not by what you do on the football pitch, but that's a mistake. I think we're losing great talents as a result of this. And
I couldn't agree more. Now, I was a success of the academic system. It just came easy to me. And I'm not from academic parents, but for some reason, it just came easy to me. What the A levels and O levels, it was easy to me. One of the greatest things that ever happened to me was being shit at everything else. Like I was like the worst in the history of my school at like metalwork or woodwork or stuff like that. And it was just torture for me. And I remember saying to my mum one day, because I had a day ahead of me at school when it was just all these things that I just hated. And she said, yeah, it's a bad day for you. But imagine what life is like for those who aren't as gifted as the academic things as you are. And I thought, oh yeah, must be hideous. Must be absolute torture. And in the end, you know, because you try, and I would try at metalwork or something, but I was just shit at it. But in the end, you just realize you're shit and you give up. But there are different types of intelligence. You know, that idea that intelligence is IQ or something like that. For me, I've always thought that's bollocks. And I'm in awe of people who can do the things that I can't do. Like people who can do things practically, who can fix things and stuff. I can't do any of that. And I think that is intelligence. It's intelligence that I haven't got. I mean, the Brazilian working class, for example, academically, they're not at the races. They've never had those opportunities. But they build their own houses. They get together and they build their own houses, you know. That's much better than anything I can do. And I think that's fantastic. I think that those different types of intelligence, you've got to value them, you know, because so the idea that you just intelligence is only academic and only based on IQ or educational qualifications through the academic system, thankfully I've always been able to see through that. Because I see some people like me who've done well through the academic system just have contempt for people who are less academically clever.
Oh yeah. But that's how you're brought up to be, isn't it? It's not necessarily. I don't think I was brought up. I don't think I came into this world having contempt for people who didn't know their times tables, you know, as well as I did. But I think as you go on in the academic system, it is kind of inbuilt into that. Those who don't know their times tables are less. Less equipped than you are. By the way, what is that black and white photograph in the background on your book shelf there? Anybody I know? Anybody?
It's Audrey Hepburn from Roman Holiday. It's the
wow.
moment when she's getting a haircut. She starts the film with long hair, and it's part of the modern touch in the film. It's part of her when she runs away and has a bit of freedom. And what she does, she goes into a hairdresser's and gets a haircut. I bought it for my wife when she had a salon to put in the window.
Oh right, okay.
Which I thought was a nice touch, but it didn't stop the place tanking.
No,
so that was a lack of intelligence on my part.
You won't stop talking about how much you lost in that hair salon, will you? You'll never ever. My uncle, my father's younger brother, who's one of many accountants in our family, he says, look, you've always got to draw a line underneath bad debt. I know it's hard to swallow, but it will lift the burden off your shoulders. And think, like your mum would say, think of all the good times that that your missus had, being her own sort of entrepreneur, running her own salon, etc. Don't just look at what hurts you, that you're rubbish at everything else. Just look at, everybody else. They're thinking, oh, at least you had a flipping salon. Okay, you lost a lot of money, but at least you had a flipping salon. At least you could afford a salon. And I'm just trying to quote your mother, because you quoted Picasso at me, so I'll throw my back at you. You've quoted Picasso, you've quoted Samuel Beckett. That one hurt me the most, by the way, only because I'm the thespian in this relationship, if you don't mind. But it did hurt me. I'm going to draw a line underneath it, just like my uncle says. But going back just very quickly to this match, I'm concerned about what happened to Gaza subsequently after this, but let's leave that to one side. I do think there is a question about...
Let's mention Venables as well, because Venables is a different type of intelligence. Venables is almost too restless for his own good. And so trying to do too many things and trying to expand into too many
similar
areas.
Positions, I would have thought. He's more defensive, Venables, as a number 4 for Chelsea and QPR. But
yeah, but as a coach, and he was a good player. He wasn't a great player. He lacked enough the speed to be a great player. He was a good one, a very good one.
He's a bit chubby, wasn't he, as a player?
Yeah, a little
just
bit.
Like Gaza.
As a coach, and he was a genius. He was ahead of his time, and he went as a young man. He went to Barcelona. And he won the title with Barcelona. They hadn't won the title for years and years. Won the title with Barcelona. He took Barcelona to a penalty shootout away from winning their first ever European Cup. And then the England side that he picked up from the idiot Graham Taylor in '94, when they'd been dreadful. And he gets them playing in 1996. He gets them playing some wonderful stuff. When the game against Holland is just a joy. I can't think of a better performance ever from an England side than the one against Holland. And they deserved better. They were better than Germany in the semi-final that they lost on a penalty shootout. But you look at Venables and you think he could have been more. Could have been more. There's enough there to think, had he concentrated on being a coach and less on some of his other more controversial activities, that he would have left more and probably have made more money as well.
I don't agree with you about Graham Taylor. I don't agree with you about him being.
We'll have to do that. We'll have to do that one day, because he'll get me into trouble. But I've got a lot to say about it.
And I'm sure let's do that one of these days. We'll find one of his great matches. The classic match, obviously, would be and Holland, don't I like this? Do I not like this one? And we'll talk about that. Just on this final note on this point about this match, this Scotland-England match. Look, a lot of us do remember the home internationals and wish we could have something like that.
Why do you like them?
Because I don't know. It's like, why do you talked about colonialism, and I think there's a comparison, even though you pointed out that Scotland isn't quite, innocent when it comes to colonialism, but it's like, why do you love when West Indies play England? There's a lot of history and baggage that comes with it. And that history and baggage unites and divides us, but does get us energized. I would pay money to see England versus Scotland. When was the last time you saw that? That was a fixture. It was a regular flipping fixture. And it's just gone. It's just disappeared. And I think they're missing a trick. In that match, in that Euro 96, you can count how many of those Scottish players are playing in the Scottish leagues. If they were to play now, I bet not one player, or maybe one or two in the side, were playing in the Scottish leagues. In that match, now it seems like the Scottish leagues have suffered as a result of the home internationals not being there. If they don't qualify for an international tournament, that's it. You don't hear from Scotland for a generation or so. Whereas when they were playing England, it was like playing an international match on home soil. They knew the enemy really well as well. They know England. This is the amazing thing about this match, is the two sides know each other very well. And Colin Hendry is going to Gaza to stop Gaza because he knows what can happen. Unfortunately for Scotland, he's not able to stop it. But there's no, he doesn't need to sit in a flipping video, pre-match video conference studying Gaza. He knows what Gaza can do. and they know each other so well, and it adds an extra spice in the match, is what I think. And I think that's one of the most memorable England matches ever because of the magic of Gazza. You say nothing happens in the first half, but yeah, they're sizing each other up to a certain, and neither of them wants to lose that match. I think that match has got more to do with the old rivalry than it has to do with Euro Championship.
With the tournament, yeah.
And,
it exists
and
independent of, yeah.
It just gives football a different perspective, Tim. It gives football, all the others can play their matches, but the moment England were drawn against Scotland, and I remember the moment, it was kind of like, yeah, football has come home because we are going to be playing one of the great matches against one of our great rivals. It may not be as wonderful a match as we hoped it would be, but I think the expectation was 100%. And I think if you went down to Trafalgar Square that day, that night after the match, you'd have still seen a lot of ginger wigs, a lot of men wearing skirts, and I'm not saying who'd be guilty, but I think you'd see a few more bottles of that stuff in the phone booth. I'm not saying, I haven't said a word. I have not said a word about who might be guilty. Just because England beat Scotland 2-0 doesn't mean that they're not going to invade London and conquer it and take a bit of London back with them, or leave a bit of them in London. I'm not saying a word. Come on now. Come on now.
That's a lot of crap.
So much trouble. Yeah, well. And I think on that note, anything else in the charts that caught your eye?
Ocean Colour Scene, trying to go back to 1967 with the day that we caught the train.
Yeah.
What else stood out? Mysterious Girl, Peter Andre.
Well, that was shit,
soft,
wasn't it?
Yeah, soft reggae. It looks like a Bounty advert.
It's horrible. It's horrible.
I'm glad you hate it.
I interviewed him years ago when he was still something of a Michael Jackson wannabe. Basically, he used to be one of these Michael Jackson. He used to dress up in Michael Jackson. As Michael Jackson dressed up on the Bad album, I think. He used to go out and be a Michael Jackson copycat sort of guy as a kid. And when he did this Mysterious Girl, he basically threw it all in and just said, well, no edge to me anymore. I might be from down under, but I'm just going to try it the pop way. And in a few years' time, I'll even marry a page 3 star. How do you like that? Mysterious Girl indeed, yeah. It was a shit chart. I mean, apart from the number 1 and number 2, it's a pretty shit chart, wasn't it? We needed something more to go with. We needed the kind of chart from July of 1966 where we won the World Cup, where you get things like I like it, and that sort of stuff. We needed a little bit more of that. When will the charts ever be in sync with football is my final point on this.
Yeah. Is this not in sync with the kind of artificiality of the moment?
I see where you're going with that. But we would have to look at the charts during the 2012 Olympics, which had a little bit of that artificiality with it to begin with. But then people power takes over and people think, well, okay, it's maybe a little bit artificial, but we're going to own this. We're going to embrace it. That's what happened at 2012 Olympics in exactly the same way. It starts off corporate selling some artificial dream, but then halfway through it, and we had that magic Saturday night in the Olympics. They call it Super Saturday still today, and that was something that was owned by the people. It was the people that made it. It was the people that spurred on the excellence of the sporting achievements from British sports people, Mo Farah, and of course Greg Rutherford, who has just revealed that he has got testicular cancer, and good for him for revealing it as well. But he's the guy that pulled out that long jump out of nowhere to make it a great day. It was a fantastic moment for all concerned.
Which one of the two would you choose? Euro 96 or the 2012 Olympics?
You can't beat the 2012 Olympics, mate. Not with, no, you can't beat it because we owned that in a way. When you get the Queen parachuting, quote unquote, parachuting into a stadium, that just tells you that she's got a sense of humour, and we never saw that before. I don't think she watches football because I remember when Princess Diana died, and everybody was like, you know, almost holding the royal family responsible, and she had to come out and save the day. And then, you know, she went on a walkabout looking at all the flowers that had been laid for Princess Diana in tribute by the public, and she was walking out, and some reporter, it was England had an important match that day, it was a World Cup match, I seem to remember, and the reporter said, "Oh, Mom, will you be watching England tonight?" And she clearly didn't know what he was talking about, but she thought, hang on, I'm supposed to be saving the royal family, showing that we are the people. She kind of goes, "Well, yes, I think I'll try to, yes, you know, that's a good idea, jolly good, thank you very much." She does one of those. But with the Olympics, I think she was genuinely proud that the world had come to her little country. Yeah, I think she was. And otherwise she would have said to Daniel Craig, "Look, I like you in the Bond films, but if you think you're going to walk into, you know, do a scene from Bond with me at Buckingham Palace, you're having a laugh." So I would definitely go for the Olympics 2012. But you'd have to ask people up in Scotland.
Yeah, good point. Good. Well, they're going to go for 2012 because they're not going to go for 1996. They lost. They were sent back home to think again.
Well, you can put it that way, or you can just say, next time, if you want to win something, leave a deposit.